Almost no other character throughout the entire franchise loves dueling as much as Jaden Yuki, the headstrong but free-spirited prodigy of Duel Academy who constantly sought out powerful opponents just so he could face off against them in fun and interesting duels. But as the series progresses, he began to understand the responsibilities that came with growing up, and put so much weight on his shoulders that he almost lost his love of the game. At least until he fought against a certain duelist. So today, we're going to be taking a look at Jaden Yuki's 10 most important cards, how they helped him grow up, and whether or not they'll make him a hero in the TCG. Transmuting to number 10, we have elemental hero Electrum, the ultimate elemental hero that showed off Jaden's mastery over the elements as an alchemist. And that's because Electrum is the fusion of the 4 classic elements, earth, wind, fire, and water. But you need to be a master of alchemy to combine these elements, as it can't be summoned in any other way except by fusion summoning. And if you do manage to bring it out to the field, you have to shuffle back all banished cards into the deck. And that's not all, because Electrum gains 300 attack for every monster your opponent controls that shares an attribute with it, which can be a pretty substantial buff, especially because it's also treated as an earth, wind, fire, and water monster alongside its original light attribute. This made Electrum an impressively powerful hero that acted as Jaden's strongest trump card during the duels of the Shadow Riders arc, especially in Jaden's final face-off against Kagamaru, who wanted to use the power of the Sacred Beast to drain the power of the dual spirits to retain his youth. And he almost succeeded as he managed to bring out all 3 beasts, but with the power of the Philosopher's Stone, Jaden was able to bring out elemental hero Electrum and boost its attack to 14,500, enough to destroy Raviel and wipe out Kagamaru's life points. But Electrum's most interesting use wasn't as a beatstick, as Jaden also took advantage of its ability to recycle banished cards, which came in clutch a couple of times throughout the series, such as in his duel against Amneal, where Jaden proved himself as the ultimate alchemist by shuffling back banished cards, which reduced the attack of Helios Trismegistus to 0, allowing him to strike the final blow against Banner, releasing his spirit from the construct it was contained within, only for him to be swallowed by the Pharaoh. Now in the TCG, Electrum was never really an impressive beatstick, but the way Jaden used it to shuffle back resources is precisely what made it a strong tool that could easily OTK an opponent. Electrum has amazing synergy with both Fusion Gate, a fusion spell which not once per turn requires you to banish materials, and Chain Material, a trap card that makes it so whenever you perform a fusion summon, you banish monsters from your deck so long as those materials are listed on the monster you're summoning. These cards combined meant that you could summon Electrum by just banishing each of the materials from the deck, then use this effect to shuffle back the materials you just banished. Then you can summon a second Electrum to the field, shuffling back its materials once again, which would give you 2 level 10 monsters on board, which you can overlay for a Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max and burn your opponent for 2,000 points of damage. But that's not where the combo ends, as like Jaden, you need to prove your mastery of the elements through the use of the Omni Heroes by banishing Gustav and the Electrum with Fusion Gate to summon out Elemental Hero Gaia, and then use Gaia and the Electrum to summon out Elemental Hero the Shining. And once you have all these cards banished, you can use the effective Fusion Gate again to summon out a 3rd copy of Electrum and shuffle back all of your banished cards, which allows you to repeat the process infinitely to burn your opponent. And it's honestly really cool that the way Jaden used it in GX actually managed to showcase the strength of Electrum's effect, which allowed Jaden to prove his worth as the ultimate alchemist. Likewise, in order to use the card to its full potential in the TCG, you need to have mastery over almost every attribute. And making miracles number 9, we have Miracle Fusion, one of Jaden's strongest comeback cards that showcases his ability to turn duels around in his favor with a single miraculous draw. And that's because Miracle Fusion doesn't need you to have cards in hand to fusion summon, and can instead banish monsters from your field or graveyard to summon out Elemental Hero Fusion Monster, giving you another shot at fighting against your opponent even when you're completely out of resources. Which is exactly what made Miracle Fusion such an iconic part of Jaden's toolbox, as he'd often draw it after his other heroes had been defeated and his back was against the wall, which allowed him to stage a comeback in even the most dire of circumstances, because Miracle Fusion gives Jaden access to some of his most powerful boss monsters, even when he has no resources to summon them, letting him easily access the likes of Electrum and Shining Flare Wingman with ease, who are often enough to win duels on their own. And the same is true in the actual TCG, as Miracle Fusion is a staple of hero strategies and it's been a key factor to the deck's historical success. There's tons of powerful Elemental Hero monsters in the extra deck that Miracle Fusion makes easier to access, including the Omni Heroes, a series of Elemental Heroes that only require 1 Elemental Hero plus a monster of a specific attribute as its materials, with the most powerful of the Omni Heroes being Elemental Hero Absolute Zero, because whenever Absolute Zero leaves the field, it destroys all monsters your opponent controls, which made it an absolutely absurd monster for its time period, as dealing with it often meant losing your entire field. As a result of Absolute Zero's success, a lot of classic hero strategies like Diva Hero and Bubble Beat consolidated around a small package of heroes, taking advantage of their individual strengths to gain advantage, and then using Miracle Fusion to access an absolute bomb of a boss monster. But Miracle Fusion can be used for far more than just Absolute Zero, especially modern hero strategies that appreciate the card's versatility and what it can summon, especially since the card is now searchable thanks to Elemental Hero Sunriser, a monster that mimics Jaden's iconic Gotcha pose, who allows you to replicate the Duelist Miracle Draw by letting you add Miracle Fusion to your hand. It's amazing to see how Miracle Fusion has managed to stand the test of time as an amazing tool in classic hero strategies that's become a staple of the modern deck, while also being able to showcase that in the anime and in the TCG, sometimes all you need is one miraculous draw to turn things around. And swimming to number 8 is Spacian Aqua Dolphin, the first of the Spacians, an entire archetype that Jaden actually designed himself as a child that ended up being shot into space by Seto Kaiba. This allowed for these cards to absorb the power of space waves, giving them new abilities and creating a new type of hero. These abilities vary between each Spacian, but in the case of Aqua Dolphin, you can discard a card to look at your opponent's hand and force them to discard a monster with less attack than or equal to the monster you control and inflict 500 damage to them. But if they don't have a monster with less attack than one you control, you take 500 damage instead. Each of the Spacians also had an extra power that they shared amongst each other, the ability to perform a new kind of fusion known as Contact Fusion alongside Elemental Hero Neos by shuffling back the necessary materials from your field. These powers combined made the Spacians a key evolution of Jaden's strategy that was necessary for him to defeat the Light of Destruction and those it controlled and manipulated, including the likes of Aster Phoenix. You see, prior to this duel, Jaden and Aster had actually faced off against each other before, where Aster absolutely dominated Jaden's elemental heroes with the power of destiny. This defeat left Jaden lost and confused, as not only had the Light attempted to break Jaden's spirit, but Aster made Jaden believe that he wasn't a true hero as he had nothing to fight for. As a result, Jaden lost sight of his reason for dueling, and couldn't even see duel spirits or his cards anymore, and opted to leave Duel Academy for good, until he was abducted by the Moon of Lo, where he met a strange alien known as Dolphinian, who tried to restore Jaden's resolve by telling him of the power the gentle darkness contained within him, and pushing him to duel an Emissary of Light with a deck that had crash landed there. But that wasn't an ordinary deck, and these cards were actually the ones that Jaden designed himself, which reminded him of the love and excitement he felt for the heroes as a child, which was enough for Jaden to feel reinvigorated, healing his spirit enough to see his cards again and use the power of the Spacians. From there, Jaden went on a small pilgrimage, meeting and collecting new Spacians until he was ready to duel Aster again with this rediscovered joy for his heroes. A joy that carried Jaden to victory, because while Aster managed to quickly adapt to the Spacians, the likes of Aqua Dolphin and Flare Scarab proved their strength, and the duel culminated when Jaden used the power of Contact Fusion to summon Elemental Hero Flare Neos, a hero that enthused Jaden so much that even Aster was reminded of his own childlike love of the new heroes. And strangely enough, this love of heroism might carry you to similar victories in the TCG, as quite a few Spacians have seen genuine competitive success across the game's history. Now, as a standalone strategy, Spacians are pretty weak and inconsistent, and don't really facilitate contact fusion well. But individually, a lot of them have actually pretty powerful effects. Spacian Dark Panther manages to play in Synchro Cat strategies, since it could be summoned with the pre-errata version of Rescue Cat and uses the effect to copy an opponent's effect and then use it against them. And Spacian Grand Mole managed to find its way into the game's limited list for years for being a really strong removal option that can deal with any problematic monster by attacking into it and bouncing both to the hand. And even in the modern era, Spacians continue to prove themselves throughout the power of Aqua Dolphin, who has become a prominent feature in Infernoble decks because of its warrior typing, which allows you to summon with the effects of Space Connector to have enough link materials for Isolde Day from a single normal summon. But Aqua Dolphin isn't just vanilla, as before you make Isolde Day, you can use this effect to look at your opponent's hand and scout for powerful cards and even rip away your opponent's hand traps, allowing you to combo off without interruption. In general, the power of space waves really did give the Spacians the strength to be viable in both Jaden's deck and the TCG, as while they're not amazing as a standalone strategy, they're excellent when splashed into other strategies, like Hero in the anime and Infernoble in the TCG, allowing for other decks to feel the same joy of being a hero that Jaden once felt. Shining into number 7 is Rainbow Neos, the representation of the bond shared between Jaden Yuki and Jesse Anderson. In order to summon Rainbow Neos, you need to fuse together Elemental Hero Neos with any ultimate crystal monster. And while it's on the field, you can activate one of 3 effects to shuffle opponent's cards into the deck, depending on the cost you pay. If you send a monster you control to the graveyard, you can shuffle away all of your opponent's monsters. If you send a spell or trap card you control to the graveyard, you can spin all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. And last but not least, you can send the top card of your deck to the graveyard to shuffle all cards in your opponent's graveyard back into their deck. These are all powerful effects, but in order for Jaden to bring Rainbow Neos to the field in the first place, he had to rely on the strength of his bond with Jesse Anderson. We saw the strength of his connection in Jaden and Jesse's Battle Royale duel against Fujiwara, where not only did Jesse refuse to betray Jaden, he even sacrificed his life points to protect him, and put Rainbow Dragon in his graveyard so that Jaden could form Rainbow Neos. But the moment where his bond shined the most was in Jaden's duel against Yubel possessed Jesse, This duel was the intense culmination of the Dimension World arc, an entire season dedicated to Jaden's quest to save Jessie from the Dark Dimension. This seemed like a pretty easy task for an ace duelist like Jaden, but even after a short while in the Dark World, Jaden began to struggle, and learning the meaning of sacrifice. At first, Jaden gave up the fun he had in duels to take things more seriously. But soon, Jaden began to sacrifice more and more until his heart had closed off completely, and allowed for a colder, more tactical personality known as the Supreme King to wake up within him. The only thing that managed to set Jaden free of the Supreme King's control was Axel Brody reaching out to Jaden with Jim's Eye of Orichalcum. Axel was sent to the stars after this, but Ojama Yellow was able to confirm to Jaden that Jessie was alive. And the Ojama wasn't lying. Jessie was alive, but his body had been taken over by Yubel, a seemingly malevolent spirit who was obsessed with Jaden's love. But despite Yubel's cruel tactics, Jaden mustered up the courage to face off against them in a duel to free Jessie from their control. Yubel using Jessie's own crystal beast to summon out Rainbow Dark Dragon. But Jaden steeled himself against Jessie's ultimate monster and realized that this was an opportunity to reach out to Jessie, and put his trust into the dark power of Super Polymerization to fuse both Neos and Rainbow Dark Dragon into Rainbow Neos, which freed Jessie from the influence of Yubel, allowing for Jaden to finally save his friend. Now, in the TCG, Rainbow Neos is slightly nerfed since it doesn't have the power to free your friends from being possessed, but it's actually still quite a strong card in spite of that. Each of Rainbow Neos' options are absurd in their own way, since they're capable of wiping out an opponent's key resource. The only problem with it is that when it was first released, it was pretty difficult to bring out, as you need to have Elemental Hero Neos, an ultimate crystal monster, and a way to fusion summon in order to access it, which is a huge investment of very specific resources. But with the release of Neos Fusion, you can summon out Rainbow Neos by using both the Neos and Ultimate Crystal monster from your deck instead, with a trade-off that prevents you from spell summoning monsters for the rest of the turn after you activate the card. This makes Rainbow a lot easier to use. You do have to worry about Neos Fusion's downsides, but that's what you get for its powerhouse going second tool that can leave your opponent with virtually nothing. And so it's really cool that the representation of the bond between Jaden and Jessie is just as strong as the anime made it out to be, since it's an excellent game-ending tool that also signifies the end of Jaden's quest to save one of his closest friends. And watching over the number 6 spot is Yubel, Jaden's sworn protector. In fact, Yubel was so loyal to Jaden that they were willing to replace their own body with that of a dragon, which prevents them from being destroyed by battle, and prevents battle damage if Yubel is attacked. And if they do end up being attacked by an opponent's monster, then you get to inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack of that monster. But in order to keep Yubel in the field, you have to tribute a monster during the end phase, and if you don't, they destroy themselves. And last but not least, if Yubel happens to be destroyed by a card effect except their own, you can then evolve them by summoning Yubel Terror Incarnate from your hand deck or graveyard. Now, in the anime, Yubel wasn't used too much by Jaden as a card. However, they weren't just a regular card. They were a spirit who swore their life as a protector of the Supreme King. And as it turned out, the Supreme King's spirit was dormant in Jaden. So when Yubel was given to him as a child, they continued to keep their promise and did everything they could to protect him. However, Yubel's way of protecting Jaden meant that everyone who dueled him underwent a misfortune, which caused everyone to fear him, which did keep him protected, but alone. Jaden knew that Yubel was the source of these tragedies, so when his designs were set off to be shut off into space, he requested that Yubel go with him. However, Yubel was placed in a separate satellite and ended up being exposed to the light of destruction, which tortured them and ended up driving them mad as they wondered why Jaden would put them through this torture, only to come to the belief that this was his way of expressing their love for them. And so, when Yubel came back to Earth, they wanted to show Jaden that same love, and forced him through similar suffering, and pushed Jaden down the path to reawaken the Supreme King inside of him, so he can gain access to the Super Polymerization and fuse together all 12 dimensions, so that Yubel and Jaden could be alone together forever. But during their final duel against one another, Jaden remembered his past life as a Supreme King and the promises he made, and so in an act of love, Jaden used Yubel's Super Polymerization to fuse their souls together, purging the light from Yubel and making their dream of being with Jaden forever become a reality. Then, once more, Yubel became Jaden's guardian angel, protecting him in Season 4 from the memory alteration of Honest and Darkness, and was even an integral part of Jaden's duel against Night Shroud, who stole Yubel and tried to use them against Jaden, only for Jaden to use Super Poly once more to fuse with Neos and Yubel into Neos Wise Man, a representation of Jaden's newfound maturity. Unfortunately though, Yubel is entirely loyal to Jaden, and so no other duelist has been able to form the same bond with them as they had in the anime. And that shows with their viability, as the effects of Yubel and their evolutions are pretty lackluster, since their burn effects are heavily reliant on the battle phase, and they're all pretty difficult to bring out to the field, with both their evolutions needing their previous forms to bring out, and Yubel themselves having no reliable way to be put on the field. But despite Yubel's lackluster performance in the TCG, they'll soon be receiving support that does a ton of interesting things for the strategy, from the likes of Mature Chronicle, which can surge Super Polymerization, And their new form, Yubel, Das Egwig Liebe Watcher, an incredible super poly target that can use Yubel to fuse away a field of up to 12 monsters. So while Yubel has never been too competitively viable, their new support is breathing new life into their strategy, and could potentially even see real success with the right build, and could allow for them to act as the protector they always were meant to be. And merged into number 5 is Super Polymerization, the symbol of the Supreme King. Super Poly is a quick play spell that can only use fusion materials on the field, but lets you use monsters your opponent controls as well. And the best part is that neither player can activate any card or effect in response to it. Although in order to use Super Poly, you do have to pay the cost of discarding one card. Jaden, however, paid an even greater cost. The original wielder of Super Poly was actually Braun, Mad King of the Dark World, who attempted to create the card by forcing Jaden to sacrifice his friends every time Braun took battle damage, as this allowed him to use his Wicked Cannon to banish a Wicked Doctrine card from his deck, which correspond with a negative emotion contained within Jaden's friends who would be sent to the stars to create Super Polymerization. Braun was ultimately unsuccessful in wielding Super Polymerization as the final emotion he needed wasn't present, but Jaden still sacrificed most of his friends. And so when he won the duel, Super Polymerization fell to Jaden and the Supreme King called out to him, telling him that in order to defeat evil, Jaden himself must become evil. Traumatized by the battle and unsure of his own actions, Jaden closed off his heart and gave up control to the Supreme King, who would use Super Polymerization as his ace card. After Jaden had reawoken, Super Polymerization had left him disturbed and uneasy as it reminded him of the sacrifices of his friends and the evils he had committed. But despite being deemed such an evil card, Jaden had to accept both the Supreme King inside of him and Super Polymerization in order to save the people he cared for most, including Jesse, when he used the card to make Rainbow Diaz. But this gave Yubel access to the card, which they used in their final duel against Jaden as a symbol of their love for them when they used a Spell Chronicle, which banished 5 cards from the deck and built up counters whenever Jaden activated a spell card. Yubel could then remove 2 of those counters to add a banished card to their hand of Jaden's choice. If Jaden accepted Yubel's love, the card he would choose to give them would be Super Polymerization, which would allow Yubel to fuse together all 12 dimensions so they could be alone with Jaden forever by forming the Super Fusion God. So Jaden went the entire duel trying to prevent Super Poly from reaching their hand. But after a vision of his past life with Yubel, Jaden made his final decision on the last turn of the duel and gifted them Super Polymerization. Yubel was still intent on merging the dimensions, and so activated Chain Material to use 12 monsters from their hand, deck, or graveyard and activated Super Poly. But Jaden had activated Spiritual Fusion beforehand, letting him pick the targets for Yubel's fusion, and Jaden chose himself and Yubel, allowing their spirit to unite with the Supreme King and purge the influence of the light from their soul. Unfortunately, one of the big downsides of Super Polymerization in the TCG is that you can't use it to fuse with your opponent, but it's still an astonishingly strong staple that's capable of wiping away an opponent's entire board, especially because no one can respond to it. So even if your opponent has a board of infinite negates, you can use Super Poly to clear it away and they won't be able to do anything to stop it. The only difficult thing about Super Poly is that you need to have appropriate targets in your extra deck to deal with different kinds of end boards. Now in the anime, Jaden's best Super Poly targets were somewhat generic, such as Dark Gaia and Malicious Bane, and this trend continues in the TCG where the strongest monsters for Super Poly have generic materials that allows the card to have a wide coverage in what it can fuse away and be applicable against multiple different strategies. But the targets you usually choose will depend on the best decks of the current format, and sometimes even the strangest targets can prove how strong they are if their materials happen to match up the end board of a format's best strategies. So overall, Super Poly genuinely lives up to its anime status, to the point where in the TCG it was banned for several years for just how good it was, making it a card that's well worth the cost of both a discarding card and sacrificing your friends in order to use it. And the symbol of Supreme King is likely to see play so long as it's legal, as the more fusion monsters that are released, the stronger Super Polymerization becomes. And fusing to number 4 is the very foundation of Jaden's strategy and the card that established fusion as a core theme of GX, Polymerization. Polymerization was the game's first fusion spell, and allows you to fusion summon a monster by sending materials from your hand or field to the graveyard. Fusion summoning is the heart of heroes. Individually, each of Jaden's heroes are relatively weak, but fusion summoning allowed these monsters to combine into stronger monsters with powerful effects. Jaden had multiple ways of performing fusions with the likes of Miracle Fusion, Diffusion Gate, and even Contact Fusion once he obtained Neos. But his most iconic way of fusion summoning was with Polymerization, which let him unleash the latent potential that was contained within heroes, and adapt to any situation thanks to the infinite potential Polymerization promises. And in the TCG, Polymerization lives up to the same potential. You would think that it would be outclassed in the modern day because of the presence of stronger fusion cards that can use materials from the graveyard, banished pile, and the deck. But Polymerization's strength is its sheer simplicity, which allows it to be a great option for any fusion-based strategy as a way to start and extend plays or even break boards. That's not all though, as Polymerization also has a number of powerful support cards that have helped it remain competitively viable. including powerful searchers like King of the Swamp, and Fright for Patchwork, which can be used to add Poly and an Edge Imp chain from your deck to your hand. And if you're looking to play Polymerization in heroes like Jaden, there are actually multiple support cards that make it a really strong option for the deck, and one that's almost mandatory to play modern heroes thanks to Vision Hero Vion. It's heartwarming to see that the game's first ever fusion spell hasn't been power crept at all, and in fact is actually one of the best fusion spells in the game thanks to its versatility and the support surrounding it. And it's even cooler that it's still a great part of the hero strategy, letting you summon out your heroes in 2023, much like how Jaden did in the anime. But out of all of Jaden's heroes, one of them was his favorite. Burning into number 3 spot, we have Elemental Hero Flame Wingman, Jaden's favorite hero and his original ace monster. In order to summon Flame Wingman, you need to fuse together Elemental Hero Avian and Elemental Hero Burstinatrix. And if it destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can use its effect to inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack of that destroyed monster. This gave Jaden a solid way to end duels by using the combination of Flame Wingman's attack to deal damage and their effect to deal burn damage, which was often just enough to finish an opponent off. The only issue with Flame Wingman was that for a fusion monster, its 2100 attack was pretty weak, and could occasionally be overwhelmed by stronger monsters. But if that were the case, Jaden could make Flame Wingman even stronger by combining it with Sparkman to form Shining Flare Wingman, a monster capable of standing up to Zane, Cyber, and Dragon. But this hero's most iconic use has always been in Jaden's first duel of the series against Crowler, as Flame Wingman was the very reason Jaden got into Duel Academy. In this duel, Crowler was doing everything he could to prevent Jaden from having a fair chance at joining the Academy since he was late, including playing his own deck that included a rare and powerful card, Ancient Gear Golem, which towered over most monsters at an impressive 3000 attack. Jaden wasn't deterred, however. In fact, he was overjoyed that Crowler was willing to go all out against him and fired back by summoning Flame Wingman. Now, this may seem like a bad move at first, as Flame Wingman only has 2100 attack. But Jaden had an extra trick up his sleeve and activated Skyscraper, a field spell that gave all heroes a 1000 attack boost, which gave Flameman just enough attack to defeat Gear Golem and burn Crowler for 3000 life points, winning Jaden the duel and proving that he deserved to be enrolled. But despite how iconic this moment was, the original Flame Wingman's burn effect isn't really that valuable in the TCG. It can technically be useful to end games in the same way as Jaden, but it's fairly awkward to use since it's so reliant on the battle phase and requires specific materials. But Flame Wingman teaches a really important concept that's important to a lot of duelists even in the modern day, the idea of the favorite card. That card could be anything, from the strongest boss monster to quirky gimmicks. Every duelist out there has a favorite card they love to use, win or lose, and are willing to play an entire deck just to facilitate it. But Wingman takes that idea to the next level, as its retrained formed Infernal Rage lets you search your deck for your favorite cards. Unfortunately, this won't let me add skill drain to my hand, but it does have the pretty solid pool of searching targets including Favorite Contact, Eternal Favorite, and Favorite Hero, which lets you activate any field spell from your deck, including Skyscraper. But that's not all, as Infernal Rage's second effect lets you summon out any level 7 or lower Elemental Hero monster from your extra deck ignoring their summoning conditions. Modern hero strategies usually use this effect to summon out Sunriser, but you can also use it to bring out the original Flame Wingman, equipped with the favorite hero, and activate Skyscraper from your deck. And that's awesome that the card is capable of recreating Jaden's iconic combo while also being a versatile and competitive option that sees play in modern hero builds, letting his favorite hero have the spotlight it deserves. And flying into number 2, we have Winged Kuriboh, Jaden's original dual spirit partner that established him as Yugimoto's successor. Like Yugi's original Kuriboh, Winged Kuriboh has a defensive effect that can reduce damage to 0, but differs from its fiend counterpart as Winged Kuriboh needs to be destroyed by battle, but prevents you from taking battle damage for the rest of the turn. This made it the perfect guardian angel for Jaden, as whenever it seemed like he was guaranteed to lose, Winged Kuriboh's damage negation could come in clutch, especially when combined with the fluid of summoning Kuriboh, which could bring them out from the deck to save Jaden the last minute. In fact, there were a number of duels across the series that Jaden would have lost if it hadn't been for the hidden power of Winged Kuriboh, making Jaden quite lucky to have the card, as it wasn't originally part of his deck. It was gifted to him by Yugimoto on their first day of Duel Academy, who believed that Winged Kuriboh wanted to go with Jaden. And those weren't just hollow words, as Winged Kuriboh's dual spirit began communicating with Jaden and guided him along the right path in both duels and day-to-day life whenever he was lost, such as when they led Jaden to Yugimoto so that he could regain his love of dueling. But Winged Kuriboh wasn't just an advisor, it even managed to hold its own in duels, but became particularly powerful during Jaden and Chaz's second duel against one another. In this duel, Chaz had been using rare cards gifted to him by Crowler to make Jaden fail his field test, and had gained the edge by bringing out VWXYZ Dragon Cannon Catapult. But Jaden managed to turn the duel around by activating a new card of his own that was gifted to him by Miss Tome, Transcendent Wings. This transformed the regular Wing Kuriboh and Wing Kuriboh level 10, who despite its weak stats was a match for Dragon Catapult Cannon, using its effect to destroy and inflict 3000 damage to Chaz in the process. Unfortunately though, Wing Kuriboh's hidden power happens to be really well hidden in the TCG. Being able to negate battle damage for a turn can sometimes keep you in the game and help you stall out, but the best ways of doing this usually involve preventing attacks or skipping the battle phase to keep your monsters safe. Wing Kuriboh's effect is comparatively a lot weaker, especially since you have to commit it to the field in some way while hoping your opponent destroys it by battle rather than removing it from the field with a card effect. And its evolved forms, level 9 and level 10, are just as awkward, as while they're definitely stronger than their original form, they're hard to summon consistently and rely too much on the battle phase. And that's definitely a shame, because in the show, Wing Kuriboh always seemed to appear whenever Jaden needed them most, both in and out of duels. It just happens to be a lot less reliable in the TCG. But it only makes sense as the successor of the King of Games would be one of the only duelists in the world to be able to make Wing Kuriboh work. And contacting in from Spacian number 1 is Jaden Yuki's ace monster and the symbol of his deck, Elemental Hero Neos. Now, Neos might seem really similar to Yuki's ace monster, the Dark Magician, as they both share the same level and attack stat and don't have any effect. But Neos' flavor text shows us a hint of his true power, as his text states that Neos is a new kind of hero that comes from Neospace that can perform a contact fusion. This means that you can shuffle back Neos and other monsters you control in order to summon certain fusion monsters, and Jaden uses newfound power across the entire series as soon as he gained access to Neos, summoning new heroes that no one else could ever imagine. Literally no one else, as Jaden also held a personal connection with Neos, as like Spacians, Jaden had designed Neos as a child so to be shot into space by Kaiba. And so, from the moment Aqua Dolphin guided Jaden to his new cards, Neos and the Spacians became a core part of his deck, with the power of Neos being the main reason that Jaden was able to defeat the likes of the Society of Light, Yubel, and even Darkness itself. But Neos' coolest moment was in Jaden's final duel against Yugioh, where we not only got to see Neos and Dark Magician face off, we also got to see Neos charging in to attack Slifer the Sky Dragon. We never got to see who won this duel, but all that really mattered was that Jaden managed to prove his worth against the King of Games and have one last exciting duel. And the best part is that in the TCG, Neos can give you that same exact excitement that Jaden felt, as it's actually a pretty solid part of modern hero strategies. Historically speaking, Neos has never really seen too much use. Contact Fusion was competitively viable in non-hero strategies, but in hero decks, Neos was pretty hard to bring out, especially alongside another Spacian. But Neos Alias, a de-evolution of Neos, was the star of a ton of hero-based beatdown strategies because of its solid attack stat, and the fact that it was a Gemini monster, which meant that it paired excellently with Gemini Spark. But modern hero strategies can actually play the original Neos and use them to his full potential. By using extra Hero Infernal Deceiver, you can search out Neos from your deck and use them to fusion summon Infernal Raids to search for favorite contact. Then, because Infernal Rage was summoned using a normal monster, you can use its second effect to summon out a Sunriser and use it to search Miracle Fusion to extend your plays. And now Neos is in the graveyard, you can set favorite contact and activate it during your opponent's turn to summon out Elemental Hero Shining Neos Wingman, which on summon can pop a bunch of your opponent's cards. So even though Neos isn't quite the ace monster it was made out to be, it's actually still a decently strong card upheld by modern hero support that makes it a pretty strong tool, giving heroes yet another way of evolving, which is exactly how they helped Jaden evolve into the duelist he is today. Alright, and that's the list. It was honestly difficult to bring down Jaden's important cards to just 10 entries, so a part 2 focusing on manga cards could definitely happen. If you think we missed any other cards in this list, or have any ideas for characters you'd like for us to cover next, please let us know down in the comments below. And remember to like the video, subscribe if you want to keep up to date on future videos, and thanks for watching.